Okay, we're going to get started now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to What I Did with My Degree. My name is Taylor Dross, and I am the Career Skills Academy Program Manager here at CUNY SPH. I graduated from CUNY with my Master's in Public Health and Community Health and a specialization in Maternal, Child, Reproductive, and Sexual Health, also known as MIRSH, in spring of 2022. Tonight, we will hear from public health professionals and CUNY School of Public Health alumni who hold an MPH degree in Community Health Sciences with a MIRSH specialization. Before we begin the panel, I want to give some background to the specialization at CUNY School of Public Health. The MIRSH specialization is designed to provide MPH and PhD students with a theoretical understanding of the social and historical frameworks that shape related health outcomes across the lifespan, as well as a foundation for research and programmatic activities in maternal, child, reproductive, and sexual health. Students from any degree program can apply to the specialization. For more information, you can visit the CUNY School of Public Health website. So tonight's panel will include moderated questions followed by an audience Q&A. As a reminder, you are able to move between this breakout room and others at any time, and the chat is open for any comments or questions you may have. So now we will hear from and introduce our panelists, and let's start with Arlene.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Arlene Mejia Juan, and I am a CUNY graduate, I believe last year, 2022, and I currently work for the Fund for Public Health as a school-based health program manager.
Great, thanks, Arlene. And now Sarah.
Thanks, Taylor. Hey, everybody. Happy to be here. My name is Sarah Pickering. My pronouns are she and her. I graduated with my MPH from Columbia in 2014, and I'm a current doctoral student at CUNY SPH. I'm in my 5th year, and I am the Research Operations Manager at Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania. So I oversee research at our Planned Parenthood affiliate in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. And we do a mix of socio-behavioral research, clinical trial research.
Great, thanks, Sarah. And now we welcome Fadila.
I think I'm next. So hi, everyone. My name is Fadila Ceballos. I am the Director of Nutrition and Outreach Programs at Montefiore's Bronx Health Collective in the South Bronx. I'm a graduate of 2018. So I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Jessica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Silk. I graduated in 2009 when it was the Hunter School for Public Health and Community Health Education. And I currently work at the Mount Sinai Health System and the Institute for Advanced Medicine, which focuses on HIV primary care. And I'm the Director of HIV Education and Training, where I oversee a statewide program to help train clinicians on their HIV prevention and care practices.
Thank you all for being here. And now we can get started with some questions. So the first question is for Arlene. As a recent graduate of CUNY SPH, how would you describe your graduate school experience? And in what ways did the program prepare you for your current position?
So I was very fortunate enough to have actually experienced grad school in its traditional format where we would be going to school. So I think that definitely set and laid the foundation for experiencing that in-person class and getting that group work done with other students. And then I was also fortunate enough to kind of like see that transition into remote learning as well and see how that impacted the group work and the way we built connections. And essentially the way I took grad school was not just a learning experience, but also a networking experience. So that definitely kind of led me into using everything that I learned during school, specifically like MIRSH related classes. I definitely use that in my actual day-to-day. A lot of electives or like the core classes that I've taken have actually translated very well into what I currently do now and did, specifically like the prevention work, HIV and prevention for that HIV. I definitely learned a lot in an elective that I took specifically at CUNY, and then as well as like the MERSH core classes that I apply now at the Office of School Health and overseeing school-based health centers. It kind of laid down that foundation and overview of like, this is what we should be doing with adolescents and this is what we should be doing with pediatrics. So it definitely laid that foundation for me.
That's great. Thank you. Our next question is for Sarah. So you are currently attending CUNY SPH as a PhD candidate. What motivated you to continue your education, specifically at CUNY, after receiving your MPH and being in the workforce? And what do you hope to achieve once you complete your dissertation?
So I was working as a research coordinator at the Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center on East 94th Street. And I wanted to be involved in more of the decision-making processes around, what types of studies we were engaging in, what those studies looked like, as well as to get training in more skills, more research skills. Those were sort of the two main drivers for pursuing my PhD. I was hoping to develop the skills that would lead me to do my own types of research. So that's still the goal at the end of my PhD process. I've also was really interested in teaching, which is some experience that I've gotten as a doctoral student and some training I've gotten around that. Also just a love of learning and just, I think all of us here like pursuing or thinking about pursuing higher education. That really led me to want to do my doctorate. And I chose CUNY for a few reasons. I really wanted a school and a program with a social justice focus, which has definitely shown up in my coursework, as well as with the work I've done with my advisor, the projects that I've been able to do, and the practical experience I've been able to gain through working with her. I met with some folks when I was deciding where to apply who were doing things that I was really interested in doing, and sort of a lot of them had come from the CUNY SPH doctoral program. So someone who works at the Guttmacher Institute, I met with her and I was just so impressed by her and her journey. And then I was also really looking for a program that I could balance school and working. So it was something that really appealed to me. And I'm so glad, even though it's been challenging, that I did it that way, because my work and my education have been so, reinforcing of each other and bolstering of each other. So that's been a really great experience for me. And I think you asked me, Taylor, also what I'm planning to do once I'm finished. $1 million question, but take a little break by just focusing on my full-time job. But then ultimately my goal is to be doing my own sort of investigator-initiated research, which I'll be able to do now that I'm getting this training in my doctoral program.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. So next question is for Jessica. So you have an array of experience in sexual and reproductive health, including roles with Planned Parenthood, New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and Community Healthcare Network. Can you talk more about how you got started in this field and what first sparked your interest?
Sure. I definitely had the interest sparked long before I figured out how to shape that into a career. So since I was really young, like a teenager, I was really interested in feminist organizing. And when I went to college, I became really active in social justice campaigns and protests and, really just trying to be politically engaged and, learning more about community health. My undergrad, I studied women's studies and sociology and focused on kind of medical sociology. I actually moved to New York City at first thinking that I was going to get a PhD in sociology. And it was not a great fit. No offense to that program, but actually in that program, someone came from the CUNY School of Public Health, Hunter at the time, and did a presentation about their public health program. And my gut just told me, you know what, this actually seems like what I want to do, because I think what I sort of learned from like sociological research was that I was so focused on being a part of communities and sort of examining communities. And I moved from Boston to New York City, and I was like, I just want to actually live and be a person in the world. And so I really liked that, that sort of promise of public health being something where you can apply, like you can learn, and if you're interested in learning and continuing to learn, you can continue to learn, but apply that to like real world experiences and really have more of like a material impact on, working with folks. So, and that's also what led me to community health education and kind of first focusing more on sex education, which I was always really passionate about, and really got my start there at Planned Parenthood. And through that experience, Planned Parenthood Greater New York, they do a lot of focus in their sex education, not just in training young people, but also the adults that support them. So that can be parents, but it also can be organizations, schools, that, teachers. And that is really where I fell in love with training and the idea of not just educating young people, but also preparing the adults in their lives to be able to provide good care or good education to young people. And that sort of led me on that path where I am now, where I'm really focused on training educators, but also training doctors, so that when folks go to health centers, their doctors feel comfortable asking questions about sexual health and being able to provide affirming services.
That's great. Thank you. So our next question is for Fadila. It seems you've always held a passion for health and nutrition, and you hold a bachelor's degree in health and nutrition science and an MPH in public health nutrition. Why did you decide to take on this specialized degree program, and how does it tie into your passion for food justice and accessibility?
Thanks. So I am also a CUNY student through and through. My bachelor's is in health and nutrition from Brooklyn College. And I found nutrition through an elective. And so I've been working in nutrition for the past 10 years. And if you don't know about nutrition, you have to do a 1-year unpaid internship to become a registered dietitian. So while I did my undergrad in nutrition, it was very clinical nutrition curriculum. It was biostatistics, it was chemistry, it was all that physiology, fun stuff. And that's where I was really going before I kind of got into the field. And once I got into the field, I actually started working in the community nutrition setting, not in the hospital where a registered dietitian would typically work. And I didn't get into my internship right away. It took me 3 tries to get into my internship. So I was working in community nutrition for 5 years before I even got my internship. And while working in community nutrition, I actually worked at WIC, where I found my passion for maternal child health. And I started learning about breastfeeding. I started learning about how to support pregnant patients and pregnant people in whatever way I could. So I did a little bit of everything in those 5 years. I did nutrition education classes in classrooms after school. I did a nutrition education at farmers markets. And once I was in these different programs, I looked up to my mentors, my supervisors, and looked at their skills and what I could learn from them and what they brought to the table. And many of them had an MPH instead of an MS degree. And so I started looking into ways to challenge myself. I felt like I learned plenty of clinical skills when I was in my undergrad, getting my undergrad degree. And so I didn't want to do more of that. It would have been more biostatistics or physiology and like very, very complex chemistry. So I decided to challenge myself and pursue something a little bit different, learn more about policy, learn more about grant writing, learn more about bigger system-wide issues. And I'm really happy with my choice. I did finish my internship. I still am a clinician, but thanks to having my NPH degree, I was able to step up sooner into my management role. And I was definitely a more qualified candidate once that position opened up for me to pursue. And now I'm a director. So it's been like a really long process, but I feel like that MPH degree really gave me the edge to step up to my new role.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on to collected questions. Some of you submitted questions for our panelists when you registered for this event, so we have a chance to answer a few of those here now. Our first question is for Jessica. What has been the best piece of advice you've received throughout your journey in public health?
Hard to narrow down. I think sort of the best advice that I have found is just being kind of persistent and, forming relationships. Even we were kind of joking a little bit, even before this started, we noticed that a lot of us have either worked in the same place or kind of knew each other's names. And I think a lot of public health is, having relationships in the community, having relationships with other people in the field, and really sort of just being persistent about what you care about and what you're passionate about. And it sounds like a lot of folks have already highlighted some of these things, like you're interested in something, you're like, how do I learn more? And you find someone who has a similar degree or similar concentration and asking them how they got there. I think that was really useful for me in the advice that I got. And that also included, for me personally, when I started at CUNY, I sort of like Velcroed myself to one of my professors because I thought she was amazing and smart. And I was just like, hey, give me all the projects. And so I just think kind of figuring out maybe mentors and leaders in the field that you can kind of draw experience from and help guide you to where you want to go is super helpful.
Thanks. We can open this question up to our other panelists too, if any of you have advice that you've received that you think would be worth sharing.
I can jump in. I absolutely echo everything Jessica said. Another thing when I was reflecting on my own experience is really try to keep an open mind in the classroom as well as in your professional lives. Or this is advice that I got. And in the classroom, in the sense of this, it's such an opportunity to learn about new ways of thinking or approaching problems that you don't always get in a professional setting. You don't always get that same opportunity to think in a new way. And then even professionally, so for myself, I knew I didn't want to be a direct service provider, but I was a healthcare assistant for about 1.5 years at a Planned Parenthood clinic. And that experience, I still reflect on, it still sort of serves me to this day. And so even though I knew it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, it gave me exposure to so many of the things that I now work on at Planned Parenthood and in the research that I do. So that was advice that I got that I would definitely pass on to others.
Great, thank you. So moving on to the next question. Fadila, what are a few of the skills you gained from your MPH that you are using today?
So many. I think definitely one of the biggest skills that I was able to nurture when I was doing my MPH is just writing. I definitely was not comfortable writing. Like I said, I was like had a very science, very like clinical background before having my MPH, and that I think was really something that it helped me to break out of my shell and like just write. Have a lots of we had to write a lot of summaries of like research, and just becoming more comfortable with research, reading research, summarizing it. It's so important, not just for clinical care, but also in your involvement with research. I'm currently involved in a research project, and I was also involved in like building a budget, building all of these different parts of like a grant. All of those skills were first introduced to me, in my MPH curriculum. So I really value that experience. I know that as soon as I was finishing, and my friend actually really needed help with a very small grant from the city, and I was able to write it for her, and she got it. And I thought that was like such a really great experience. And I felt really accomplished just to understand the process. So it really just built up I did my program part-time, so it built up over 3 years. And I really think it was a great experience.
I want to jump in and add as well. I feel like that grant class that is kind of required for everybody. I've applied it in all my years as a public health professional. I have strictly only worked at FQHCs and or managed grant programs and grant deliverables, and doing it versus learning it are two completely different things. And I came in to like my first job not knowing anything about grants, and then as I was going through school, I was like, I get it now, it clicks. And yeah, just being able to grant write at my previous job and being put as part of that team to be able to write a grant was just spoke volumes of what I've learned, and just seeing my education being put into practice, like, okay, so yes, like I am capable of doing the work. I am capable of writing something out and being in that community and experiencing that, and being able to like apply my knowledge to that. I think that's just great.
Thanks, Arlene. I actually have a question for you. Did you know what you wanted to do with your degree when you graduated, or even before?
Taylor, it cut out. Who are you addressing?
Oh, I'm sorry. Arlene.
What? Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Did you know what you wanted to do with your degree once you graduated, or did you know before?
I think what kind of led me into wanting to pursue a master's in public health was I had minored in public health as an undergrad, with the full-fledged focus of going into medicine. And then I kind of took a year off and did AmeriCorps, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. So essentially it's like the Peace Corps, but stateside. And I was placed at a community health center where my main focus was like population health and helping link uninsured and underserved women and men for preventative services. So anything, the top 3 cancers, which was like cervical, breast, and colon cancer. And that kind of inspired me and made me realize, like, you know what? I feel like there's a need for me to be here and be able to provide these services to someone that looks like me. Because I feel like a lot of the times there's a lot of medical mistrust, and when you see somebody that looks like you and able to connect on a cultural basis and being able to say, hey, listen, I know it's scary to do all these big tests, but it's important for your health, and be able to connect with people on that one-to-one level really made me realize, you know what, I kind of want to pursue my master's in public health and be able to provide that impact to that community. And so that's what kind of led me into, like, okay, I really feel like this is something that I enjoy doing. And this is something that I feel like would not just benefit myself, but benefit a lot of people.
Thank you for that. Jessica, what would you say has been the key to your professional growth?
That's a tough one. I think like willingness to learn and just like staying current has always been really helpful. Like Fadila mentioned earlier, just kind of learning those skills in terms of, being able to understand research and to be able to summarize it. I think like that kind of equipped me to want to continue to be able to learn and advance. And just being open to trying new things. Like I have shifted quite a bit. Like I've always kind of stayed on the same path, but I went in a very zigzag way that brought me here. So I guess the kind of other word of sort of advice I would say related to that success is that I felt like a lot of people told me like that, you have to stay in a job for a certain amount of time and, you have to sort of stay, like it was a little bit more old school. And I actually personally felt like I learned more by, being at some positions for 2 or 3 years. And like, I was able to learn how different organizations do things. I was able to learn different programs and what they do. And I felt that really helped to give me like a rounded experience that I was able to apply. And I feel like confident now going into other positions. So yeah, I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Thank you. Fadila, what are the best ways someone entering the public health field can start networking?
Can you repeat who that was addressed to? You keep cutting off in the beginning of your sentences.
Sure. Fadila, did you hear the question or should I repeat it?
Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. What are the best ways someone entering the public health field can start networking?
I love that question. I'm very passionate about networking, but I love networking in like a very friendly way. I first would say network within your peers, right? Look to your left and to your right, like whenever you're in class or, or look within your pool of classmates because they will be in the field with you and you'll say, hey, didn't we have class together? So I definitely have built relationships from my undergrad years with my peers. They might not have ended up in the same area as me, but we're still connected in terms of like the field and our values and our, and so forth. So I would also say, it's a lot of people kind of like don't like networking because it's kind of like, you're reaching out whenever there's like something you need from a person, but it can be the other way around, right? Like you can help someone else, which I think is really important because you never know when they can mention your name in another conversation and it might lead somewhere. So I would also, share to, go to networking events with like an open mind. I think these are opportunities where you can just learn about what people are doing, listen to what they're passionate about. People always love to talk about their projects. And you never know, you really never know where these conversations will lead. I take on a lot of students and they often request reference letters from me, and I'm happy to do it because I know that their work, I've seen their work and I'm happy to lend a hand. Like I said, it's not just like about what you would need, it's about how you can also help people.
Thank you. Sarah, what are some challenges you faced as a grad student or are currently facing as a PhD student? And how are you going to, or how have you overcome these challenges?
I think that was for me. Yeah, so I think one of the hardest things with the PhD life is the longevity and the long-term commitment and just mentally knowing you're going to be doing this program for, 6 years or so. I would say another challenge is it can be an isolating experience, and it's not something that people talk about that much, but when you're doing a PhD and your dissertation, you're doing your own research without a team, which is not typically how things look, in a professional setting. So of course you have your advisor and you might have other people you work with, but it's very self-directed and self-motivated. So I would say making personal connections with other people in your cohort, and then even people, if you have friends in your life who are at other schools, but they're doing a PhD, it's still a similar enough experience that you can gain a lot of support in those types of relationships. So ask your community for help, ask your family for help, your partner, your friends to support you. That's definitely, like, people want to see you succeed. And so I think that's something that I would encourage everyone to do in terms of getting through some of the long hours that are spent on dissertation and PhD work.
Thank you for sharing. So now we're going to move on to a Q&A. So if anyone here has any questions for our panelists, feel free to use the chat, or you can come off mute. So we have a question in the chat, and it says, how was your first work experience after graduating with a master's in public health? So if there's anyone who wants to take on that question.
I guess I can speak on that a little. I was fortunate enough that while I was in school, I had already had kind of transitioned into a position from AmeriCorps onto like a coordinating position. When I graduated, that kind of gave me like kind of pushed me to be like, what's next for me? And so that kind of gave me kind of, I guess, the edge and kind of like, oh, I'm so proud of myself. Let me see if I can speak to my job and see if there's any more room for growth. And that started that competition for me, from moving from a coordinating position to a manager position. And I was ready to I felt like I was ready, and I felt like with the education that I was given, I was ready to take on a more bigger role at the company. So it definitely sparked motivation of like, what can I do for the specific population I'm working with, and I'm ready to take on more responsibility.
I can also add a little bit. After getting my MPH, it actually took me a little bit of time to find a job in this field, and it took me about a year. And I just remember being really disheartened. But I knew that that sexual and reproductive health was where I was meant to be. And so I would just say, keep the faith if that's your passion, keep the faith in that passion, and it's just keep trying, keep applying, keep doing what you can, and have faith in that passion that you have it.
I would just echo a little bit of what Sarah said. My first job after graduating wasn't purely public health. It was like an educational program. And I kind of just tried to apply my skills how I could. Like other folks said before, the grant classes really helped. So I could help apply for funding for the program. And sometimes I would sort of be a little like public health nerd and say, well, why don't we bring the speaker? And, I would try to like think of ways to integrate health into the program that we were doing. And it was a little disheartening at first, but that was only like maybe 2 years before I started to really find like my niche. So it can be hard to get in, but it's not because you're not the right person or that you don't fit. It's just that sometimes it's a small field. So just keeping it up, I think, is super helpful.
Yeah, I want to echo what everyone said. I actually didn't start off working as a like with my MPH. Like I started off as a clinician, right? Like I started off as a dietitian seeing patients, and that typically was like doctor visits but with a dietitian, right? So one of the key moments I think in my career was definitely when my supervisor left, and it was only a year after I had been as a clinician there, and so there was a big vacuum. She had been there for 15 years. So let's just preface that it's big shoes to step into. But she's my mentor, right? So she definitely recommended me pursuing that position, which was a great opportunity for me. But it was a big stepping stone, and there were other applicants, right? But since I had been there for a while, I was seen as the better fit. And, as someone that was like younger, stepping into a leadership position was like a really big moment. And there were definitely some doubts, right? But lo and behold, the pandemic started and all of these things happened really quickly. And I think I showed that I really had the skills necessary to step into the role. And it was like a really big moment for me to realize, like, hey, I've learned all of these skills. Now it's time to put them into practice, right? Like now I'm helping with grant writing. Now I'm working with a development team, creating budgets, managing staff, all of these different skills that I definitely would not have if I had gone the MS route, the master's in nutrition science route. So all that to say, it was definitely worthwhile experience.
Thank you all. So we have a few other questions in the chat. The next one was, I know a few of you talked about specifically the grant writing courses at CUNY and how helpful they were. But so this question is, what courses did you find most useful in your public health career?
I don't remember. I don't know if this course is still being taught because it's been a while since I was there. But in addition to the grant writing course, it's also funny because the courses that were the most helpful were not the ones I loved when I was taking them, right? Like everyone's talking about the grant writing course, but we didn't love it at least when I was taking it. But it does end up being really useful. And the other similar course was kind of the program planning and design course, where you learn about creating logic models and being able to design a program and all of those components. I didn't like that, but I think it's a sort of concrete skill that I now have, that I realize that is a benefit of having MPH that other folks in the professional world don't have, is like that kind of planning mindset, systems mindset, where you're really able to think about, where do we want to get, what is the overall goal. That's also a really important question that people don't always stop to consider. It's like, what are we actually trying to do here? And then working your way toward that goal. So if you do take that class or you struggle with it, it will definitely pay off in the end, I would say.
I would also like to add, I don't even know the name, but the class that was like part 1, part 2, data evaluation and learning how to read data and all that stuff. I feel like I definitely, the stuff I learned in that class, I applied at both jobs that I had and have. Like, right now I work in school-based health and I'm analyzing a lot of data that's coming in, and that really helped me understand, like, okay, data collection methods and what goes into it. So I appreciate it more. And did I have fun in that class? No, I did not like it, but it definitely gives you a better understanding of like data that's being pulled. And I feel like it applies to anything and everything, because lately everything is data. So
Great, thank you. Our next question is if you can speak to any career choices that exist in maternal child health.
don't know of any specific positions that are kind of like only using this like concentration. I think it just like folds really well in my interest and my career path. Even before I started the MPH, right? I worked at WIC. I was just really passionate about maternal child health, breastfeeding and chest feeding. This is something that I was doing direct care with patients. And so it just kind of like, this concentration allowed me to learn more about it and also write more about it, right? I did my own research. I wrote my own, I wrote topics, papers on topics that I wanted to write about. So what did I research? I researched like the benefits of breastfeeding and chest feeding. And so I just kind of like built on my interest already. And so, now that I'm the director of the nutrition program at my clinics, I have a really strong vision of like where I want to focus on. I want to focus on increasing breastfeeding rates. I want to focus on improving prenatal care. So all of these things that I'm bringing into because I chose to have this concentration are part of like my overall vision of like improving nutrition in the South Bronx. So it's really what you make of it. And I really liked how flexible it could be.
I just wanted to add to that, in case you're kind of looking for positions. I briefly kind of had a part-time job at the Bureau of Maternal, Infant, and Reproductive Health at the Department of Health. And, they do a lot of work in similar areas around breastfeeding and also trying to improve prenatal care and access to prenatal care, and also working to reduce infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And when I was at the Community Healthcare Network, which is a federally qualified health center, one of the grants that I worked on was like a specifically maternal infant health grant that I think came from Public Health Solutions, which is one of the bigger funders in the city. And it was interesting because my grant was specific to education and providing breastfeeding education, prenatal education, but we would have these grantee meetings of all of the different organizations across the city who are getting the same funding. And there were a lot of different types of programs across the city who were doing different types of maternal infant health projects. So I think, like what Fadila said, there's a lot more out there. It might not become immediately apparent, but there's like so many different ways that you can frame that. And those positions are definitely out there in those projects.
I can speak a little bit to also what I do currently, because I don't know how many people know like Planned Parenthood does research, which is what I do. And we do a lot of really exciting and cool research. So some projects that I'm involved in are developing an at-home STI test device. So somebody could order this device, online and self-test for chlamydia, gonorrhea, trichomoniasis. We have another study coming up around self-collection of a Pap sample. So if you think about someone who doesn't want to get a pelvic exam or maybe has a history of trauma that prevents them from, wanting to get a pelvic exam or a Pap test collection. But that is just to say that, sort of echoing Jessica's point, is like, and Fadila's point, like there's a lot out there that might not be immediately, that you might not know is going on. So just, doing your research on different organizations and what opportunities they might have. And then also to echo my earlier point, I worked as a healthcare assistant at a Planned Parenthood that really set me on the path that I've been on ever since. And so even though that wasn't the exact right position for me, it sort of opened all of these other doors for me to pursue. So just encouraging folks to keep an open mind.
Thanks, everyone. Our next question is talking about after graduating with your MPH and you're weighing your options for a career path, would you recommend starting full-time or gaining more experience through a fellowship?
I'm happy to jump. I feel like I'm like very jumping into the answers. I guess for me, I'll just be real that I needed to have a full-time position. I think most of us probably, right, didn't really have that option. It's not always realistic for folks. So, but that is, I think that's a really great way to start your career as well. So I just, if anyone is worried that they think that they have to have some special kind of fellow, if you do have a special fellowship, amazing. But if you don't have the opportunity, you know, to not be paid full time and to continue your education, I just want to put it out there that you will still be great. And that's totally normal, I guess, because it can feel really overwhelming about making the right choice. But it seems like a lot of folks here, you know, learned a lot from their programs, but we also learned by doing our work, even when it wasn't exactly what we anticipated. So I think the other kind of common thing that I've heard from the other panelists is the rich experience that they had working with patients, or kind of more clinical experience that they had before they had their master's degrees. So if I would say that if you don't have direct experience working with clients or patients, and that is an opportunity for you, I think it's really important for our work to be grounded and like really having that firsthand experience of what it's like to navigate the healthcare system, and you know what it's like to be a patient, and so if that is an opportunity, I personally would almost recommend that over a fellowship. But that's just, those are my 2 cents.
There is a similar question in the chat also, just asking if you have any advice for someone who's considering pursuing public health or higher education for public health, but they're not sure if it's the right field for them, what advice you would give them? Since it is such a big field, it can feel very overwhelming to choose a concentration or decide if getting an MPH is the right path for you.
I guess I'll jump in and say, I think that's the beauty of public health. I feel like it's so broad, but yet you gotta really narrow down what you like / don't like. I feel like a part of me, like my experience is like I got in and I did this term of AmeriCorps, and I'm like, great, I know I want to work with patient care, and I want to do more work in the community. So that sparked the MPH in community health. But then as I was doing my community health, I took an elective on LGBTQ plus experience. And it definitely made me realize, like, listen, I used to do a lot of outreach as an AmeriCorps. And so it definitely honed me into the HIV and prevention world. And that was a whole new thing that I was like, listen, I don't know anything about it. Like, I didn't know what it was like back in the 80s when the epidemic started, like coming in and like kind of learning all of that. Definitely spearheaded me in a completely different direction. And I did prevention services and like HIV care for almost 3 years. And I was like, I love this. But then I knew then, like with that HIV experience, I was also kind of being funneled to school-based health and how I could support the school-based health center in that specific field. And that kind of made me realize, oh, I kind of want to go into school-based health and apply my knowledge that I have currently from prevention and that community organizing and all that, and spearheaded me into school-based health. So I think just my advice would be the classes that you're currently taking now and what you're reading, like it sounds silly to say what sparks joy to you when you talk about public health. And then that can kind of be a starting place for you to figure out like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is not what I want to do. Because I knew research was not for me. I don't like research. So definitely like take it, what you're learning now, like see what you like, what you don't like, and then it'll be like a starting place for you.
I just want to add quickly to what Arlene said, because it reminded me that when I was choosing between going towards education, like working in the school system or my MPH, and I had a call with an old mentor from undergrad, and he asked me like, oh, what are you looking at? And I explained it, and he just told me straight out, well, it sounds like you're really passionate when you talk about the public health part, and you don't sound very passionate when you talk about the education part. So maybe even just like kind of talking to the people around you and like speaking it out loud, they might be able to reflect back to you like, ooh, you actually sound really interested in this piece. So maybe just talking to the people around you who know you would also be helpful for that.
Yeah, I would also add the fact that you have electives, right? Like I actually don't have a concentration in MERSH. I have a concentration in public health nutrition, and I also took the core courses for MERSH. So I really loved this aspect of learning about maternal child health, sexual reproductive health. And so I chose them as my electives, and I kind of fulfill most of the requirements. And so you can definitely choose to get some fun electives and test it out.
Someone else in the chat said that they are now working at a network of FQHCs in the grant and development department, and they're looking to switch to working more directly in the MERSH field in either program management or research. So do you have any advice about transitioning from one field to another in public health?
I guess I could just say skills are transferable. Take that budget knowledge. Say, listen, you need help with budgets, grant writing. I'm the person, and kind of market yourself to that and say, like, these are my strengths and I know these are my weaknesses, but I'm willing to work on that. And if you take a chance on me, believe it or not, a lot of people want someone who has that drive and that passion, because once again, like, kind of thinking as a manager right now, it's like, there's a lot of skills that you can teach, but you cannot teach passion. And if they can see that, then I think if you take that knowledge with you that you've learned now and applied it to what you want to do, then I think people will see that and it transfers in an interview.
I think also just reaching out to people and even having informal conversations about the kinds of things that they do to see where you might fit. Most people are very open to that in this field, especially. I think we all want to support each other. And that's been my experience. And so don't hesitate to reach out to people, ask for just an informal conversation. And then it'll help you to sort of figure out where you want to go. And definitely echoing what Arlene just said about transferable skills. I mean, budgeting, absolutely. Everybody wants somebody who knows how to budget. Writing, organizational skills, collaborative skills. There's all kinds of things that you already have that you can bring with you, and just, try to think about all of the great skills that you already have that you'd be bringing, and a fresh perspective too, which we're all looking for.
Thank you. I think as of right now, those are all the questions in the chat. So if there are any other questions, everyone can put them in the chat or feel free to unmute and ask it. Oh, someone just said, can you speak to the experience of moving from junior to entry-level roles to management?
I can share a little bit about my experience. So one of the ways in which I got my foot in the door at my clinic is I started as a volunteer. So I started as a volunteer in my second year of my NPH. And until that moment, I want to say I did have like a lot of community nutrition experience, but it was mostly about like patient facing or participant facing experience. And like I was tallying up the numbers for the deliverables, right? Like I just was asked about numbers all the time and I didn't know why. So I definitely started to see like the behind the scenes once I kind of moved up the ladder and kind of became staff. So I started as a volunteer, then I moved on to staff, and I was mentored by my mentor. And so she was the manager at the time. She did some training before she left so that I was able to kind of like know the ropes. But it was definitely like interesting, especially as the youngest person in the leadership position. It was a big change. Like I said, my manager had been there for 15 years, and there were a lot of people that have stuck around in the program for decades. And so to bring in new ideas and new ways of thinking was a little bit of a challenge. And the biggest challenge that we all had was the pandemic. So in that sense, we were all new to to our jobs in that sense. So I guess the pandemic really kind of eased things for me because it made everyone kind of work in a new way. So yeah, I want to say just be patient with yourself and with others, because it is a transition. You're not a volunteer anymore. You're not, a staff anymore. And being a manager definitely makes you test your social skills. You have to be a little bit more stern sometimes. And that's still something that I'm practicing. But that's not to say it's a bad thing.
I would just add that one thing that's kind of tough about management, getting into management, is that it's one of those things where any job that's looking for a manager wants experience being a manager, but how do you cross that bridge? They want all of this experience. And I supervise staff now, and they've expressed that to me, and I've tried to figure out how I can support them, and I did the same thing when I was in their position. So some recommendations might be like, I think I made the transition from entry level to management kind of early on by seeing like, is there someone I could just sort of supervise on a project, like a tutor or like an intern, like if an intern's coming in asking if you could help train that person and supervise them, like try to think outside the box about ways that you could get management experience. Maybe it's training a new person who's coming on board. So you can say, yes, I have actually helped onboard someone and I know what that takes. And then on the other side, it might be like, if you have a position now, like trying to be open with your manager if you feel comfortable about the skills that you would like to gain. A lot of times that happens in the like yearly review process. So it might be like, hey, I want some experience in budget management, but that doesn't happen in my position. So like for that, what I've done is like, I'll kind of work with one of my staff to say, well, I manage the full budget, but let's create, in this next time we do this project, this conference, whatever it is, why don't you take the lead on putting together the budget and tracking it so that you now have the experience that you can say that you've done that before. So sometimes supervisors are more supportive than you might think if you were trying to get like a new type of experience. And you don't necessarily have to tell them it because you want to have a new job. You can kind of just let them know like this is something that you want, to have more experience with, and kind of have your eyes focused on where you might be able to ask to pick up some of those experiences so that you can gain them.
Thank you. We do have another question in the chat, which is, from your previous experience with job hunting, did you mostly rely on networking and asking around, or applying directly on websites?
I think for me, it was a mix of everything. I think definitely doing that AmeriCorps term kind of opened some doors for me because I got to network across multiple sites, and a lot of people, met a lot of people who I built connections with. And that's actually how I landed my first job, was the fact that somebody that had supervised me, and somebody, that director of that specific program, had seen the work that I was doing and the outreach and everything that just be like kind of made me I guess in their eyes say like, oh, this person loves what they do, and you can tell. And so they asked for me to interview for that position, and I didn't even think that I should have applied because I didn't have the required job description, so I didn't even try. So like I was like, okay, that's great. So networking, definitely one. Apply anyway, because you never know, like maybe you may not have everything on there, but you still hit certain points. It doesn't hurt to try. And then also, I guess, like apply directly to the website, and if somebody does recommend you, you should like definitely use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. And I would recommend applying through the website so you can show you took the time to really complete that application. And as a person who reviews a lot of resumes and cover letters, it really does make a difference to try to personalize, your cover letter, work on your resume, update your resume, and also try to make a connection with someone who works there or someone who knows someone who works there. It doesn't hurt to ask. And it could be someone, you haven't talked to in a while. It's still worth asking and trying to make that connection. It will help with your application.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, then we are going to start to wrap up. So we are coming to the end of the program, and I want to thank all of our panelists for being here with us tonight. And to close out, each panelist will give us their final thoughts. So let's start with Arlene. Is there anything you would like to share with us as we close out tonight?
I guess just be passionate about what you do, and be easy on yourself, because I feel like it gets overwhelming. So definitely, you're doing great. I feel like don't be too hard on yourself and keep pursuing your MPH.
Thanks, Arlene. Jessica, what are your final thoughts for this evening?
I guess one of the kind of themes that I picked up on my fellow panelists talking is just, not being too afraid to like connect with people and to network. And I know I can be shy sometimes. So sometimes it's just like helpful to have people tell you that, like, it's totally normal to reach out to people, to network. And I think people like being helpful. I think we all here care about the field. We want to see smart, passionate people. And so even when we're helping other folks who are new to the field, we're not seeing that as like a burden. We're seeing that as like, how can we make this field full of passionate people who have really great experience? So definitely don't be shy, and always apply to positions, because there's always going to be someone who's competent who's definitely not qualified. So you may as well just put your hat in the ring and feel confident, and hopefully you'll get an interview. You never know.
Okay, Sarah, is there anything that you would like to share with us?
I would just say, I think something that a lot of us here are able to do is sort of bring together our passion and our skills, which is, not everyone gets to say that they're passionate about what they do, and that word just keeps coming up tonight. So it's a privilege and a blessing. And I would just say, while nurturing your passion, also focus on those skills, those harder skills that you can learn in your coursework are going to help you to get to the positions that you want to get to. And so sort of honing your skills and feeding your passion. It's just what I wanted to echo.
Thank you. And finally, Fadila.
Yes, so I think after hearing what everyone had to say for their final words, I would also say that while this is your passion, it is important for you to take the time to take care of yourself within the field, and just know your worth. I think this is a field that is often like we all said, built on passion, and like we really want to help our communities, but also we sometimes undersell like our skills, and we need to really advocate for ourselves in a way that lets us live in New York City, or you know, have like yeah, support our living expenses. All of these different things are important, and sometimes yeah, we shouldn't take that for granted, right? Like it's still a master's degree, you still work really hard to get to this point, and so you should really advocate for yourself and know your worth.
And one final question for tonight is, why should someone apply to CUNY SPH?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. Why should someone apply to CUNY SPH?
I think the flexibility, I was working part-time when I started my master's I was actually doing full-time, and then I switched over to part-time because I ended up getting a full-time job. So I think the flexibility of catering to afternoon and evening classes definitely helped pick CUNY SPH, and also the fact that you can also have kind of like a hybrid format or just fully remote if that's your thing.
I feel like I've spoken to a lot of people who were considering applying for an MPH and they weren't sure where they were going to go. And I was in that same position. I think I just applied for all of the schools in New York City because I wanted to stay here. And kind of the biggest advice I give people is that this is one city, like technically the same resources are available. Technically, there's some schools that are Ivy League and have more power. But if you are a self-motivated person, you have access to the same jobs and the same people, and you won't have as much debt. So I think that's sort of my sort of thing that I like to tell people is that don't feel, you know, no offense if anyone does go to the more expensive schools, but you don't need it. You know, you can definitely learn the same information. You can definitely have the access to the same types of internships. So if you want that because you think that education is specifically going to help you, then please do that. But don't ever go to a school because you think that you're going to have better connections, you're going to have better job opportunities just because of the name of the school, because that's not very cool.
I'll also add that just off of what Arlene said about the flexibility, because of that, so many people are also working. And so it really enables that networking with your peers that we talked about before. The other thing I'll say is so much practical exposure through this program, and that might be a little bit more for me as a doctoral student, but I've gotten to work on so many different projects and different types of research that I've been able to do with my advisor or with other professors. And so I think that that's a big part of CUNY's mission, is helping people get that experience and that exposure. And that's been very useful and helpful for me.
I want to echo what everyone said, especially the lower debt. I think that was a huge motivator for me, especially because I had to do an unpaid internship for a year. So that was not fun. Yeah, as a CUNY student, like I said, I did undergrad at CUNY as well. I think it's well worth the price, and also it's really well respected. I've worked with like Jessica said, I've worked with alongside people that went to Ivy League schools, and we've done the same work. So, I think it's really important to acknowledge that it is more accessible for people, not just because of the flexibility in the programs. Like I said, I did my program part-time, and it took me 3 years, but I did it. And so, and like I said, the price is also really good, and it's well respected. So that's why I chose it.
And you just made me think, Fadila, with that accessibility piece, like it does allow more people to be at the table, right? In terms of our colleagues and our peers. And I think that just the people you're meeting are going to be a wider range of people because the program is more accessible.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. On behalf of CUNY SPH, we want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. We hope that this panel was insightful and encouraging. If you are a current student, don't forget that there are many resources available for you in navigating your public health career. You can just reach out to the Office of Career Services. For potential students, feel free to contact the Office of Admissions for any other information you may need. And staff will be in the main room of the Zoom meeting for a few minutes if you have any other questions. And please complete the brief survey that will pop up once we end tonight. And we hope to see you at future events. And I hope everyone has a great night.